Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Singing Teachers Talk podcast. Things are looking a little bit different this week as it's just you and me getting to spend some quality time together. So, hey, hi, how are you doing? How's your teaching week been so far? Now, I know you can't really respond to me, but I like to think you're doing so anyway, even if it's directed at your computer screen, on the tarmac on the road in front of you, or into that delicious cup of something that you have poured for yourself. You know, it's been almost a month since I trekked up to Sheffield, and trek it was, being packed in tighter than a tin of sardines on the train, the stereotypical football fan breathing carling fog into the carriage on the wave of their low larynxed chants, which I daren't repeat here, me trying to discreetly pop a chocolate treat into my cheeks so as not to disturb my neighbour, who might as well have booked a seat directly onto my lap, to present at the Vocology in Practice and Bass Training Hybrid Conference. And you know, it was all well worth it to see real life humans in the flesh, to geek out with other voice teachers in the room and with those who joined virtually, and to learn from the array of other speakers. When I was asked to join the panel of presenters, a few thoughts ran through my mind immediately. One, absolutely fucking not. I have no knowledge to share whatsoever, nothing of importance to say, and no one will actually want to hear from me at all. Two, how unbelievably grateful I was for the opportunity to be a part of the conference for the second time and to challenge myself that little bit further. And three, if I'm going to do this, I want to talk about something that will resonate with other voice teachers, that will pull us together as a community, that will bring comfort and that feels important to me. Then I arrived back at thought number one. So I ended up presenting a talk on managing imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm. And because of how almost exclusive such experiences appear to be, we decided it would be a useful topic to bring to you here on the podcast. That said, I hope that by the time this episode finishes, that you'll feel heard and comforted, supported and encouraged, and feel equipped with some tools to take away to help manage those moments when imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm arise. So I'm going to start by sharing my confession. Sometimes I am completely overwhelmed by the amount of information and responsibility I'm faced with as a singing teacher. That upon reflection, I am simply not good at what I do, and that any day now, the team made up of my colleagues, students, and their parents are going to find the smoking gun to uncover my fraudulence. It feels like a confession because something about it seems like I'm admitting a secret, that to reveal experiencing imposter thoughts, low confidence, or overwhelm will be to render myself completely vulnerable, make others distrust me, or invite them to question my credibility as a teacher. But to confess also implies that it's something to be kept private, that it's not something others would share or even comprehend. And that just simply is not the case. We only have to look to other esteemed figures that have walked this earth to know that. The former First Lady of the USA, Michelle Obama, one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century, David Bowie, multi-award-winning actor Tom Hanks, civil rights activist and author Maya Angelou, and one of the greatest, most groundbreaking scientists of all time, Albert Einstein. They have all expressed feeling and experiencing these things for themselves. So I decided to undertake some informal research, reaching out to other singing teachers and vocal coaches to ask about their experiences with such feelings. And this is what I found. Of course, there are hundreds of us out there, But out of the 33 singing teachers and vocal coaches who were able to respond to me, and a big thank you if you were one of them, 100% of them reported having felt imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm, with imposter thoughts being the most common. 54.5% of them said that these things arise now and again, but 15.2% said these were things that were cropping up daily. Such feelings are activated by a number of scenarios, all individual to our own experiences and situations, but here's what I collected. Isolation. As teachers, we are often alone in our jobs. Comparison to other voice teachers, worrying about judgment from peers, teaching observations which make our skin crawl. And then there was anticipating impending sessions, worrying if they're actually going to go well. And then when reflecting on them, worrying that they actually didn't. When exercises haven't worked as expected, there's no immediate results, the singer doesn't seem to understand what's going on. So much information and so many things to consider. Voice forums and social media can be a brutal place for us out there. Juggling act of private life and business life. Perfectionism. New opportunities and new students, almost that fear of success. Needing to demonstrate. Gaps in knowledge or learning something new which then actually contradicts something that we thought of before. Struggling to solve a singer's vocal issue. And sometimes it can just be completely random. And accompanying these scenarios are intrusive thoughts. And these can be things like, just quit. You don't know enough, and you certainly don't know what you're doing. You haven't helped that singer at all. In fact, you've just confused them. You don't have the skills. Do you even know what a piano is? You can't keep up. You need to study more. You don't deserve success. You're not a good enough singer yourself. If you ask that, you'll be judged. If it's not perfect, it's not right. Look, another social media post, course, book, which proves that you don't know anything. Insert other teacher's name here has got it all figured out. They'd know exactly what to do. Everyone will leave you for another teacher and no one will want to buy from you. What other career could you pursue instead? Didn't you once want to be a nun or a librarian? That one was mine. The librarian thing, I get. The nun, no idea where that came from. So let's take a moment to understand these experiences a little bit more. The term imposter phenomenon was coined in 1978 by clinical psychologists Dr. Pauline R. Clance and Dr. Suzanne A. Imes, and their paper is called The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention, and there'll be a link for you there if you'd like to read it in the show notes. Imposter phenomenon doesn't really describe a syndrome or a psychiatric disorder, but more a psychological experience triggered by a given scenario. And the initial study that Clance and Imes did focused on the experiences of women, but as we progress to talk about some of the potential origins, I believe these are exclusive across all genders. So some of these origins could be things like being the minority, being in a room of people and not really seeing anybody who looks like you, whether that's ethnicity, class, sex. Family labels. The way that we are labelled in our families as we grow up can have an impact on imposter syndrome. For example, if you are labelled as the pretty one, or the clever one, or the good one, we might then grow up to either try to prove these things wrong, feel like we can't exist outside of them, or feel like we're always trying to push the boundary on them. Intellectual phoniness. So sometimes if we meet someone we truly admire, we can pretend that our beliefs are aligned with theirs, that they're the same, even if actually we have a different viewpoint or a different opinion, which can make us feel like intellectual phonies and therefore trigger those imposter thoughts. Social rejection. So in the original study that Clance and Imes did, women were saying how they feared to show their intellect in case society rejected them for it. Being the student, we might even see this in our own pupils, the amount of feedback they get, the amount of opinions that are given to them, which can make these imposter feelings more present for them. And us teachers. Thanks to George Bernard Shaw and his 1903 play Man and Superman, the phrase, "those who can't teach," still wafts around society today, cropping up therefore in our limiting beliefs, thinking that we aren't good enough to be doing what we're doing. And then burnout. As teachers, we are often taking on a lot, and especially as self-employed teachers, we feel like we need to do all the gigs, all the admin, all of the teaching opportunities that we are presented with, and sometimes it can get too much. And we start to burn the candle at both ends. We might start to not enjoy what we're doing and therefore experience things like burnout. So how can we actually manage these feelings of imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm then? Well, I've collated a variety of tips across different categories, and by no means is this exhaustive. It's not arranged in order of importance, and it's absolutely not there to challenge the importance of integrity or development. Equally, these things can be amended to suit the singers that we work with who might be experiencing imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm themselves. And if none of these work, well, we're just doomed. I jest. The first category we're going to look at is acknowledgement and acceptance. And the first point I want to make here is to do with intention and being human. Our intention is likely always to be student-led, to be focused on the student's goals, to listen, and to give good advice and explore with them. It's rarely our intention, if ever, to give a bad lesson, an ineffective lesson where we confuse the student and give an inefficient exercise. We are mere mortals, just human beings, and it's part of that human experience to make mistakes. Being the expert in the room, and I say that with bunny ears, can erase the permission to get it wrong sometimes, especially when there's money being exchanged. However, it's really quite unrealistic to expect lessons to always be completely plain sailing, that you'll always hear everything completely accurately and be able to solve things in an instant, and that you'll have a major breakthrough every single time. It's not a guarantee anyway. Singing involves the whole self. It's somatic and holistic. It also means then that we're expecting ourselves to contemplate the entire physiology over 600 muscles, all the joints, and the entire biopsychosocial model of that singer in that small silent gap that we have between song, exercise, and feedback to arrive at a definitive and unshakable answer. Arguably then, it's quite comforting to acknowledge that we can never really know for absolute certain why a particular vocal challenge is occurring, why a particular exercise worked or didn't, and that instead we're generally being guided by educated hunches and informed intuition. It's a stab in the dark a lot of the time. Whose expectations are they anyway? Is this what our students really expect of us and the lesson? Or are we accidentally enforcing our own standards, our values, and our high expectations onto them? Highlighting the knowledge gaps. We cannot be everything to everyone. We cannot know all there is to know about voice, and to wait until we did would be to never give a voice lesson ever. Some say the more that they learn, the more they realise they don't know, which is a bit annoying really, isn't it? But what we can do is highlight the areas of vocal pedagogy that we feel quite confident with, and then highlight the areas which are like gaps to us. This can help focus our CPD a bit more efficiently and potentially more deeply. We can then implement the CPD on ourselves, trying out those exercises, and maybe even explaining the idea in rubber duck theory, which I think came from the field of computer programming, where we would take an inanimate object and explain the process or the idea to that object so that we can practice it and test our own understanding of it. One of the common triggers for imposter syndrome and low confidence in the survey I sent out was the teacher's own singing skills and piano skills. Now, of course, there are great benefits to being able to demonstrate in the moment. But as voice teachers, we can recognise also that we'll have our own vocal challenges, whether that's our own vocal pathologies, our own biopsychosocial model, an area of technique that we're just working on ourselves. But this can also be of benefit to the singer in the room. For example, I have self-diagnosed myself as one of the women, I think it's about a third of women who experience PMVS, premenstrual voice syndrome symptoms. And so when it feels appropriate to do so, I can share that with the singer in front of me, who then might be able to consider that for themselves in their own experience. And like the aging voice, we might not be able to demonstrate quite as we did beforehand, before we hit menopause, for example. And general difficulties, if we say, you know what, this used to be a really tricky part for myself as well, or I'm working on this in my own practice, my goodness, does it not humanize us? Does it not allow the singer to realize that this is an ongoing skill to be practiced? And equally with piano skills, there is so much benefit to being able to play an array of scales, be able to accompany with chords, read a little bit of sheet music and understand what's going on in terms of tessitura for rep decisions. But I'm of the belief that you don't have to be a pianist virtuoso to be an effective singing teacher. And equally, we can continue to take lessons ourselves. We know so many singing teachers. We're in a pool of them all the time. So let's buddy up and help each other out with our own practice. And then practicing what we preach. We encourage our students to be tolerant of their own mistakes and non-successes because we understand that learning can occur from them. We use negative practice or the Goldilocks method, going to each extreme to find the balanced middle. So maybe we can practice what we preach and be more tolerant of our own errors so that we have more opportunity to learn from them. For example, if we make a mistake on the piano playing a scale or a piece of music, let's just acknowledge it with a quick oops. Or maybe if we're demonstrating something in the moment vocally and we don't do it quite as we expected, we can talk out loud and explain, okay, well, perhaps I pushed a little too much or added too much subglottic pressure or didn't have the right vowel shape, whatever the scenario might be. Let's just acknowledge it. A simple comment can be freeing, it can humanize us and help in creating that positive and safe learning environment for our singers. After all, if they see us making a mistake, maybe they'll feel the permission to do so themselves. Then let's reach out and team up. This was the most popular response in the feedback. People like to talk and we're isolated a lot of the time. So let's buddy up, nut it out with like-minded teachers. And it can also help us realize there's a lot that nobody is quite sure of yet, which, however backwards it might seem, could make us feel a little bit more secure in our studio room. And perhaps most importantly in this category is to build each other up. We're not in direct competition. Even though marketing might tell us otherwise, there are enough singers to go around and there are enough of us to do great things in this field.
I'm just pressing the pause button on the podcast for a very brief moment to invite you to book your free BAST call. If you've been thinking about joining the BAST community through one of our courses, but you just don't know which option is the best for you, then why not book your free Zoom chat with our very own Kimberly George, who has all the answers. Head over to basttraining.com/book-a-call/ and click that big blue button. That's basttraining.com/book-a-call/. Now, where were we?
Moving on to the category I've called I Don't Know. This feels like a Saturday night game show. The zone of proximal development and the concept of scaffolding is an educational framework that was initially introduced by psychologist Lev Vygotsky and which has been modified over time by other pedagogues. And this can help us reference where a singer is in the learning process, i.e. cannot do with or without assistance, can do with assistance, or can do independently. And this scaffolding technique can help us understand how we can bridge the gaps. This is something that's actually explored in the BAST training level 5 qualification, where Lynn Hilton discusses thinking out loud as part of that scaffolding framework. And this is where we can talk the process out loud so the singer can actually hear us. It takes the pressure off us to know the answer immediately, gives us the thinking time, and also gives the students the opportunity to understand the process of troubleshooting, which they can then apply to their own practice and independent learning. So for example, you have a student whose goals are to belt. They have a perceptually strong chest voice and a perceptually weak head voice. They explain that their head voice is not somewhere that they tend to visit because they don't like the sound, and they don't feel like it's particularly strong. So we could think out loud. Okay, so you have said that your goal is to belt. You don't often visit your head voice and you feel like it's quite thin and weak, again, reflecting their language back to them. So in order for that belt goal to be accomplished, we'll likely want some balance in those registers. And so spending some time in the upper range would be potentially beneficial. And in order to strengthen that, we could use this SOVT, this consonant vowel combo on this particular scale. And therefore we have spoken out loud the process. And then there is uttering those 3 empowering words. I don't know. But then following it up with, but I'm going to do some digging and I'll come back next week with some ideas. This just creates an open and honest relationship. It creates far less panic than trying to mask it somehow. It gives us the opportunity to explore further between sessions and report back, giving us that trust in the relationship. And it's really unlikely that the student's going to think we aren't very good. In fact, it will just build that team spirit, and it might even get them thinking upon it in the gap between sessions too. For a TED Talk in 2017, imposter syndrome expert and author of The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Valerie Young, said, and I quote, "In order for us to stop feeling like an imposter, we've got to stop thinking like one." So this is where reframing comes into it. Reframing involves challenging our limiting beliefs and moving away from inhibitive behaviors and emotionally charged thinking towards something more truthful. So let's find the facts. When those moments of imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm arise for you, I dare you to challenge them. Question, where's the proof that I'm a bad teacher? Is it a fact that I'm not good enough? Or is it a belief? Where's the proof that I did a bad job? I would make a bet that would struggle to provide the evidence. We're very aware of the language we use with our students, and perhaps not so aware of the language we apply to ourselves. So maybe we'd benefit from granting ourselves the same courtesy here. Maybe we could avoid words like should and invite words like yet. For example, I should know more about vocal acoustics could be reframed to I'm keen to understand vocal acoustics further. I'm just not there with it yet. That feels much kinder, doesn't it? Perhaps then this desperate need to cram information into our brain can be reframed into curiosity. It might just even help information retention too. Visualization. This is something that I learned from Tommy Ludgate, who we have another podcast episode with actually. And I was doing some creative business coaching sessions with her. And I was talking about moments of imposter syndrome and low confidence. And she encouraged me to visualize the cheerleaders in my life sharing that same space as me and what they would say. So I would visualize my nanny Doreen, my husband and my best friend being in that room with me. I've done something similar actually when I was performing. In one of my contracts, I had to strut down the stage, which felt so far away from me, it was incredible. And I found myself placing my celebrity crush in the middle of the audience, which I think I've spoken about on this podcast before. And at the time it was Harry Styles, and since then it's probably been Richard Madden. This month it will be Happy Valley's James Norton. Call me fickle in love as you will, but the visualization really works. And then referencing. Something that I've been doing quite a lot recently is referencing the resource of knowledge or the concept in the moment I'm explaining something to a student. So for example, say we're talking about registers or belt. I might say things like, I recently watched an awesome webinar by Kerry Obert who talks about twang in belt. But I also spoke to Amanda Flynn who said this about belt. What do you think you'd like to explore right now? Which one feels like the most fun or the most helpful? This not only can introduce new resources to the student and give them a bibliography, it also gives them the steering wheel to drive their own lesson into whichever direction they feel they'd like to go. And it also just opens out curiosities and questions. Catalyst for growth. Who's to say the entire experience of imposter syndrome can't actually be reframed into a catalyst for our development? Stephen Bartlett of The Diary of a CEO says, for me, what people call imposter syndrome isn't evidence that you're in the wrong situation, one that you aren't supposed to be in. It's clear proof that you're in the right one. And then there's marketing and advertising psychology. I believe John Henney actually did a class on this with the Voice Study Centre recently. Perceived value is made up of all the credentials and the experiences that we've had that we can then swank about on the internet and plaster all over our social media to make us look good. And it's essential for marketing and attracting the people that we want to work with to our business. However, when we're seeing each other's as teachers, it can provoke things like comparisonitis and worrying that we're not doing a good job or that other people are better than us. The true value, though, is what we're actually offering, the quality of the experience that the student gets. We're supposed to see adverts and posts and other media content in a way that makes us feel like we don't know enough, that we're missing out, like we've got FOMO, or making us doubt ourselves. That's the way they get us. That's why I've got loads of lotions and potions in my bathroom that tell me that they're going to get rid of my eye bags, and yet each time I look in the mirror, there they are. But if we can recognize that what we're likely looking at is a purposefully controversial headline to tempt us to click or buy, it might make us challenge those moments of imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm a little bit more effectively. Self-reflection, that's our next category. Let's have the student summarize at the end of each task or session. This is something Kerry Obert mentioned at the very beginning of our most recent chat with her. If the student can summarize what they've learnt, what they can take from it, or what I call confidence finishers, what they did well, then we might learn as teachers if what we've intended to communicate has been communicated well. It might help us identify what is yet to be learnt that we can then bring back into the next lesson. It might set up the next task and the next session well for us. And it might actually make us feel a little bit of pride that we did a good job in that session because the student is recognizing some good things that they can take away. And then there's self-reflection, whether that's in a journal, in our own mind, on a post-it note. We can highlight what we did well in that session and something that we'd like to improve on ourselves. That's what I really like about the BAS Level 5 qualification in their formative and summative assessments as part of one of the modules. It asks for a filmed lesson observation with a reflection of the process. So things like the rationale for the lesson strategy, why we chose those exercises, but not because we have to demonstrate all of the correct things, but to show the ability to reflect. What are the weaknesses and the strengths? Where are the gaps of knowledge? And what's the plan for development? Ask your clients. Our clients are our best feedback asset. After all, it's them who are experiencing the teaching. Ask them why they continue to have sessions with you. What do they like best about their sessions, and why would they recommend you? Then you can take those keywords and use them in your marketing so that it feels less eggy when you're having to self-promote. And request a testimonial. It's a massive confidence boost. And again, you can use that in your marketing. Boundaries and non-negotiables. On the Diary of a CEO podcast, organizational psychologist Adam Grant says, and I quote, "What's the difference between values and beliefs?" And this isn't a bad joke, I promise. He says, beliefs are what you think are true. Values are what you think is important. So understanding our set of values, not those that our parents want of us or our partners or whoever, ours, highlighting what they are, why they're the chosen ones, and ordering them into what psychologists reference as the hierarchy of values, can help us to make more aligned and satisfying choices in both our working life as teachers, the ideal students, our marketing choices, how we present as individuals in the field, as well as in our everyday lives. The creator of the 6-Minute Success Journal, Dominic Spence, says, and I quote again, "You know you're living by your values when your activities bring you fulfillment, and when you feel that you're flourishing and doing the right thing, whatever that may be for you. If our actions are in line with our values, including the small tasks that land on our desk every day, we'll accomplish these tasks with much more satisfaction and motivation." At the beginning of the episode, we were talking about some of the scenarios that trigger these feelings of imposter syndrome, low confidence, and overwhelm. And one of those things was the juggling act between life and work. We are not just the teacher. We are the wife, the husband, the partner, the solo thriver. We're the dog mum, the cat mum, the iguana mum. We are the marketer. We are the administrator. We're all of those things, and it can become very overwhelming. Sometimes we take on things which feel like a misplacement of energy. So if we can find out what our values are, we then can be bringing to the table exactly what we want to be represented as. Equally, when we then go on social media, and as Claire Delaney said in her episode with us, doom scroll through reels and reels of everybody doing fantastically, we might just be able to put that into more perspective. If someone is doing a master's, maybe we won't feel shame or worry that we're not doing the same, because we might realize that actually we don't want to do one. Or equally, if somebody is TV coaching and we realize that actually that's not where we want to go with our career, those feelings of, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing great things, will be replaced with, look how awesomely I'm representing in the way that I want to represent in this field. Delegation. Now, of course, this might come with our own financial situations, but perhaps there are ways that we can delegate the more boring administrative tasks so that we free up some time for our creative spirit. Scheduling apps, studio management apps, whether that's somebody to manage your social media for you, or even bartering. Perhaps there is somebody out there who could come on board as your PA as an exchange for giving their child singing lessons. And then enforcing boundaries and implementing those non-negotiables. So as self-employed teachers, we can often blur that line between business hours and life hours. Responding to an email at 10 p.m. on a Sunday evening could give the student the green light to expect your availability at unreasonable hours more regularly. With financial obligations, we can often accept all student inquiries, extra work, gigs, and admin, which encroaches on all parts of our lives. So boundaries need to be enforced in alignment with our values and our non-negotiables. My non-negotiable, I'll share with you, is eating dinner with my husband every evening. And another one, because I'm a 100-year-old grandma who goes to bed before 10:15 p.m, I know that work will need to wrap up by 9 p.m. at the latest for my mind to deboggle and get ready for sleep. So what are yours? And also, let's recognize the other things that make you you. I am, at the very core of me, a bookworm and a bit of a foodie. Slight amateur chef and a completely incompetent baker. But at my core, I've got those novels in my heart. So my non-negotiable is that I will read for half an hour a day or an hour a day. That's not going to be taken out of my life just because I have an interest in voice too. Sometimes it feels to be an expert in our field, we have to live, eat and breathe voice. But taking a break and having something else can actually also be really beneficial to that passion. So if you like to paint or potter or garden, that's 100% allowed and to be encouraged. Wherever you are in your teaching career right now, you are so enough as you are. That's not to say we don't grow and develop, but you are enough. Just referencing Valerie Young, she says that at the end of some of her presentations on imposter syndrome, participants will come up to her and say, "Thank you so much for all your tips. Is there anything else I can be doing?" So this comes down to compliance, the implementation of some of these tips and sticking with them. And if they don't stick, then asking ourselves why and trying out some new ones until we find the ones that work for us. Since delivering this talk almost a month ago now, I've actually seen a shift in my teaching. I'm more able to recognize the things I'm doing really well as a teacher and what I'm actually bloody good at. I hope you experience the same. And if you get those imposter moments, feelings of low confidence or overwhelm, I'm probably feeling them too, just like your other colleagues in the field. So reach out to us, or you can just find this episode and press play and I'll be right there waiting to remind you that you're already awesome. If you want to connect, you can find me at Alexa Terry Vocal Coaching on Instagram, or at A Terry Vocal Coaching on Facebook, just to make it complicated, or reach out to me directly at BAST Training on the email alexa@basttraining.com. Until next time.